The tapping started soft enough that I almost convinced myself it was the heater contracting. 3 neat little knocks from the other side of the sliding door. Then 3 more. I had both hands locked around the steering wheel so hard my fingers were numb, and the van wasn't even moving anymore. The engine had died 2 minutes earlier, but the radio was still whispering static through a country station, like something was breathing through teeth. Every window had gone white from the inside, not fogged, frosted, thick and blooming, feathering inward across the glass in fern shapes that twitched when I looked at them too long. Another knock. "Elias," my father's voice said from the dark cargo space behind me, low and patient. Dead 6 years, and still somehow annoyed with me. "You always did make things harder than they needed to be." I didn't turn around. I knew better by then. I just stared at the rearview mirror until I remembered I wasn't supposed to do that either. The metal grate behind my seat gave a slow, miserable squeal, bent inward. The thing back there laughed with my mouth. "I can take it," it said. "The debt, the shame, all of it. Just open the door." Something warm touched the back of my neck from inside a van full of sub-zero air. And that was when I understood the rules had never been made to save me. They had been made to teach it how to use me. It started 3 nights before that. The first thing I noticed about the route was how easy it would be to disappear on it. That probably wasn't the healthiest thought to have on the first day of a new job, but I hadn't been making healthy decisions for a while. I'd left Anchorage in a hurry with 2 duffel bags, $800 in cash, and a voicemail from a man named Darren Pike, telling me that if I didn't come up with 23 grand by Friday, he'd collect in whatever way taught the clearest lesson. He didn't shout when he made threats. That was the part that got under my skin. Men who stay calm are usually the ones who mean it. I found the route through a guy who knew a guy who did seasonal hauling out of Fairbanks. He said the interior carrier work was boring, remote, under the table, and perfect if I needed to vanish for a month or 2. He said the last driver had quit without notice. He also said nobody up there cared who you were as long as the mail got through and you didn't ask questions. That sounded close enough to mercy that I took it. The van was waiting behind a maintenance shed outside Nenana, idling in the dark blue of early morning, exhaust curling up in pale ropes. It was one of those long white delivery rigs with no side windows in the cargo section and a faded red stripe peeling off both doors. The logo on the side had been scraped away, but I could still make out the shadow of old lettering beneath it. North Interior Relay, maybe. Hard to tell. Inside, the cab smelled like diesel, wet gloves, and old coffee. There was a route clipboard on the passenger seat, a company thermos in the cup holder, and a packet clipped to the dashboard with a bent black binder clip. On top was a typed sheet labeled Official Winter Route Protocol. Under it, half tucked away, was a stack of lined notebook paper, covered front and back in frantic handwriting. That should have been my first clue. Instead, I laughed. Not a nervous laugh either. A real one. I was 29, over my head in gambling debt, sleeping 3 hours a night, and still arrogant enough to think I could spot bullshit on sight. Especially rural bullshit. Superstition always came off the same way to me. Too many details, too much confidence, like people were trying to scare themselves into feeling important. I flipped through the typed rules first. Check engine temperature every stop. Keep the vehicle locked during all deliveries. Do not leave the route line due to snow cover or wildlife activity without dispatcher authorization. Maintain fuel above 1/3 tank. Report carcasses, downed trees, unstable bridges. Standard winter stuff. Practical, clean, professional. Then I skimmed the handwritten pages clipped beneath it. Don't stop for lights in the trees. If you hear a knock on the sliding door while driving, speed up. Never answer anyone who asks how much mail is left. If the mailbag starts to feel heavy, throw it out the window. Do not reverse after sundown. If you see someone you know on the route, keep driving. I snorted so hard I had to wipe my nose on my sleeve. Sure, I said to nobody. And if I see Bigfoot, I should offer him certified parcels only. The maintenance guy who handed me the keys didn't laugh with me. His name was Coulter, maybe 50, with a beard so iced over it looked dipped in sugar. He stood outside my door with both hands shoved into his armpits while I read. "You get both sets?" he asked. "Looks like it." He stared a second longer than he needed to. "Don't lose either one." That was all he said. No welcome, no good luck, no explanation for the route or the residence. Just that. Then he backed away from the van like he didn't want to be close when I pulled out. I should mention here that I'd already started feeling better by then. That's important. Up until that morning, every decision I'd made for the past year had come with a crawling sense of being hunted. Sportsbook apps, poker rooms, cash advances, lying to friends, borrowing against things I didn't own. By the end of it, even normal sounds had started feeling loaded. A phone buzzing in another room, knuckles on an apartment door, tires slowing outside my building. But once I got north, and the city dropped away behind me, something in me loosened. The road through the interior was so empty it made human problems seem small. Black spruce, hard snow, frozen river cutbanks, power lines that vanished for miles at a time. No traffic, no apartments. No men collecting debts in parking lots, just road. I started the van, linked my phone to the cheap Bluetooth receiver, taped under the dash, and put on a playlist I'd made for driving. Old rock, some country. A couple songs from high school I only admitted liking when nobody else was around. I poured coffee into the thermos lid and checked the first line on the route sheet. Cabin 3A, mile 11. Hale Residence, mile 18. Drop box at Old Pump Station, mile 26. Bridge turnout, mile 31. Various listed in pencil after that, some crossed out, some rewritten. The fact that somebody had added route changes in pencil should have bothered me. The fact that half the mile markers were off by a quarter mile from the printed sheet should have bothered me more. Instead, I just adjusted the heater, settled into the seat, and thought about how smart I'd been to leave Anchorage when I did. That was the mood I started in, smug, relieved, half convinced I'd beaten the system by taking a job nobody wanted, in a place nobody sane would choose. As the maintenance shed disappeared in my mirrors, and the road narrowed between walls of dark trees, I tapped the handwritten rules packet against the dash a couple times, then slid it under the typed company sheet. I remember saying it out loud because I thought it was funny. "Relax," I said. "I'm not the guy who scares easy." Then I put the van in drive and headed into 60 miles of white silence as I owned it. For the first 3 hours, the route did everything it could to prove me right. That was the genius of it, I think. Not the horror part. The patience. The road itself was rough but manageable, more packed snow than asphalt, with tire grooves frozen hard from repeated runs. The spruce trees crowded in so tight on either side that the morning light came through in narrow blue strips, and every so often I'd pass a gap where the land opened onto a frozen creek or a low field crusted with wind-blown snow. It was beautiful in a way that made you feel temporary, too big, too indifferent, but it still felt normal, remote, not haunted, work, not omen. Cabin 3A was the first stop, a plywood box on stilts with a metal chimney and 2 satellite dishes mounted to the roof like insect eyes. I carried a parcel up to the porch, boots crunching in the cold, so sharply it sounded like broken glass. Before I could knock, the door opened 3 inches. A hand came through, not waving, just waiting. I handed over the package, got a mumbled thanks from somewhere behind the door, and then the hand disappeared again. The door shut. 3 deadbolts slid into place in a row. That part was odd. The next place was odder. The Hale residence sat farther back from the road, behind a chain-link fence half buried in drifts. They had their own mailbox at the gate, but the route sheet specified hand delivery only. When I walked up, I saw why. The mailbox itself had been bent inward from the inside, like something had tried to punch out of it. I told myself it was frost heave or some idiot with a bat. I even smiled about it. Mrs. Hale answered the door with her coat still on, like she'd been standing there waiting. She was maybe 70, thin as split kindling, and she looked past me before she looked at me. "You're not Victor," she said. "I'm filling in." Her eyes dropped to the van behind me. "Did they give you the pages?" "What pages?" That got a reaction. Not a big one, just a little collapse in her face, like she'd expected to hear that eventually, and still hated it when she did. I handed her a padded envelope, and she took it with both hands. They were shaking hard enough to rattle the paper. "You keep your speed up after dark," she said, "and if anybody knocks from the inside, you don't acknowledge it." I almost laughed again, but something about how quietly she said it stopped me. "Everybody keeps telling me that. Then everybody wants you alive." She closed the door before I could answer. I heard the lock turn, then another one below it. Then, something heavy dragged across the floor on the other side. Back in the van, I took a longer look at the typed protocol sheet. It was almost insultingly boring. Maintain speed to preserve engine temperature. Lock the vehicle during every stop. Confirm parcel count after each delivery cluster. Report any animal carcasses visible within 20 feet of roadway. If route deviation is unavoidable, contact dispatch before proceeding. I found myself appreciating those rules more with every weird interaction. They were the only part of the day that felt anchored in something rational, so I followed them carefully. I checked the temp gauge at every stop. I locked the van even when I was only 10 feet away from it. I counted parcels. I made notes on the clipboard. Something was calming about being good at a small thing. By mile 20, I'd started to feel almost proud of myself. A few more stops blurred together. A trapper's cabin with reinforced shutters and no footprints anywhere around it. A pair of welded community boxes outside a fuel depot that smelled like old oil and cedar smoke. One place where a little girl watched me from an upstairs window without blinking until I got back in the van and drove away. Everybody took their mail fast. Nobody lingered. Nobody asked where I was from, which in Alaska usually meant one of two things. Either they were polite, or they already knew enough not to care. Around noon, I pulled over beside the old pump station to eat a sandwich and look over the route additions written in pencil. The station had been abandoned long enough for the warning signs to bleach pale. Snow drifted up against the loading platform. There were tire tracks in the lot, but not recent ones. That was where I found the next handwritten note. It was tucked into the crease between the passenger seat and the center console, folded twice. The paper had yellowed around the edges, like it had been there a while. "If the mail in your bag starts to feel heavy, throw it out the window." That was it. Same frantic, blocky handwriting as the other pages. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the glove box with the rest of the unofficial garbage. Then I picked up the nearest mail sack and gave it an exaggerated lift. "Still light," I told the empty van. I don't know why I kept talking out loud that day. Maybe because silence on an empty route makes you narrate yourself just to prove you still exist. Or maybe part of me already understood that the road liked spoken things, that it listened. The sacks were fine. The engine was fine. My phone had no signal, but I expected that. The company-issued sat phone sat docked beside the dash, powered off. I didn't see any reason to use it. Whatever panic had infected the last driver and half the residents out there, it clearly hadn't infected reality. The route was lonely. That was all. By the time I started back up again, I'd built myself a neat little theory. The old carrier had probably cracked. Isolation will do that. Long roads, repetitive work, no daylight in winter, too much coffee, too little sleep. He scribbled down some nonsense, passed it along, and the locals, already living half feral in those woods, made a folklore out of it, because remote communities get bored and weird. The company humored them by saying nothing. End of story. It was such a satisfying explanation, I didn't notice how much I wanted it to be true. At mile 28, I passed a handmade sign half buried in snow. Most of the paint had peeled off. but I could still read the words. No idling at bridge turnout. There was no official marker for that on the route sheet. No note from the company. I drove past it, shaking my head. By then, I felt almost insulted by the whole thing. Like the route was trying too hard to spook me and failing. Like I'd been invited into some provincial little superstition and was too smart to play along. I remember thinking about Anchorage then, about the men I owed, about how far away they felt, how clean the air was every time I cracked the window, how nobody on this route knew my name beyond what was on a temporary employment form and a payroll envelope. Everything is fine, I thought. I actually smiled. That was the dangerous part, not the fear. The relief. Fear makes you alert. Relief makes you stupid. The bridge turnout was not scenic in any official sense, but it looked exactly like the kind of place people pull over to photograph, because the world suddenly opens up there. The road crossed a narrow steel bridge over a creek cut deep into the earth, frozen solid, except for one black seam of moving water near the center. On either side, the land dropped away into a tangle of birch and spruce, all of it silvered by old frost. Beyond that, low hills rolled off under a white sky. The whole scene had that stripped, colorless beauty you only get in the interior in winter, like the landscape had been reduced to its bones. I saw the turnout, remembered the weathered sign I'd passed earlier, and pulled in anyway. That's the whole truth of it. I didn't stop because something lured me. I didn't stop because I was tricked. I stopped because I wanted a picture, and because some part of me had started enjoying breaking the handwritten rules just to prove how fake they were. I left the engine idling, left the keys in the ignition, jacket unzipped, gloves off so I could use my phone screen. I stepped out into the cold and felt that dry, punishing air hit the back of my throat. It was the kind of cold that strips the inside of your nose raw on the first breath. I took one photo of the creek. Then I heard the pulsing. At first I thought it was mechanical, some odd vibration from the bridge supports, a diesel rumble traveling through metal. But when I stood still, I realized it was coming from below the bridge, from under the ice. A rhythmic thudding, too fast to be water, too wet to be wood. Like a heartbeat if a heart had gotten confused and started panicking. I moved to the railing and looked down. Nothing, just ice, that dark running seam, and my own breath ghosting past my face. The sound stopped. I laughed at myself then, but it came out short, forced. I took another photo just so I wouldn't feel ridiculous for stopping, then turned back toward the van. That was when I saw the shape. The cargo section had no windows, but the side mirror caught the open angle through the front windshield and driver's side glass. In that reflection, just for a second, I saw a figure standing in the back of the van behind the grate partition. Tall, too tall for the roofline, wrapped or draped in something that hung wet and heavy, like soaked wool blankets. Its head was bent at an angle that made my neck hurt to look at. Not dramatic. Just wrong enough that my brain stalled on it. Then I blinked. The cargo space was empty. I stood there a few seconds longer than I should have, phone still in my hand, waiting for my heartbeat to settle. The only sound was the engine idling and a little loose squeak from the van's belt assembly. "There you go," I muttered. "Cab fever in under 4 hours. New record." Back in the driver's seat, I did a quick, embarrassed check over my shoulder. Nothing but mail sacks, parcels, a bundle of flat-rate boxes, and the metal grate separating me from them. The engine temp sat normal. Fuel was good. Cabin heat worked fine. I put the van in drive and rolled back onto the road. No consequences. That mattered more than anything. I'd broken one of the main handwritten rules. Maybe two. I'd stopped at the bridge. I'd gotten out. I'd left the vehicle open and unattended. I'd felt that brief animal spike of adrenaline, then nothing happened. The van kept running. The road kept going. The world stayed physical and boring. That's when the confidence turned mean. I started mocking the rules under my breath, not because I was brave, because I was relieved they'd failed. It's ugly, the way people get when they think they've outsmarted something. I remember passing the next mile marker and actually feeling superior to whoever had written those notes. By the time I reached the next stop, I had my composure back completely. It was a small, cedar-sided place, with blue barrels stacked beside the porch, and a porch light still on, in broad afternoon gray. A man in insulated coveralls met me outside before I killed the engine. He was younger than the others, maybe late 30s, with wind-burned cheeks and a scar cutting through one eyebrow. He took his package, glanced past me toward the road and said, "You stop anywhere you weren't supposed to?" It was such a direct question that I answered with a laugh before I thought about it. "Nope." He kept looking at me. Something in that silence made me add, "Why? You guys got cameras hidden in the trees?" His jaw tightened. "If you did, don't say it again after dark." I should have asked what that meant. Instead, I shrugged, got back in the van, and drove on. A few miles later, the sat phone screen flickered on by itself, then went black again. I told myself the cold did weird things to electronics. Then my playlist cut out in the middle of a song. Not static, not a disconnect, just silence, like the audio cable had been unplugged. I checked the screen at the next straightaway and saw my music app still running, the track time moving normally, with no sound coming out. After 10 seconds, the music returned on its own from the exact place it had gone quiet. I remember that, because I felt a tiny pressure at the base of my skull when it happened. Not pain, recognition. The kind you get when you hear a sentence in a dream and know it matters, even if you don't understand it. Still no consequences I could point to, still no proof. And that was enough for me to keep going, like I hadn't crossed anything at all. If you want to know the stupidest part, it wasn't the stopping. It was that by then, I had enough doubt to be careful, and I chose not to be. I had every opportunity to pull over while it was still daylight, go through the whole packet, turn on the sat phone, call dispatch, ask plain questions. But asking questions would have meant admitting I was uneasy, and I was still too in love with the idea of myself as the one guy out there who couldn't be rattled. So I drove deeper into the route, and whatever had watched me at the bridge took its time. Night didn't fall all at once out there. It bled in. The sky went from white to gray to a color I can only describe as the inside of a bruise. The tree line thickened until the road felt tunneled. My headlights reached out in 2 flat beams and touched nothing except blowing snow and trunks. Every reflective marker looked a little too bright. Every curve arrived a little later than I expected it to. The route sheet started making less sense after mile 40. There was a delivery point listed there I didn't remember seeing earlier when I'd reviewed the page. No cabin number, just a square penciled beside an old maintenance spur and the initials RP, with a circle around them. I checked twice under the dome light, thinking I'd missed it before. Same thing both times. Maybe it had been there all along. Maybe I'd stopped noticing the pencil marks. The road narrowed as I turned onto the spur. Trees leaned in close enough to scrape the van's sides with stiff branches. No other tire tracks, just my own headlights and the slow roll of snow through them. Then the engine died. No sputter, no warning. It just went dead under me. The van coasted 10 feet and stopped. At the same second, the temperature gauge slammed from normal to red so hard the needle quivered there, then snapped clean off at the stem and dropped behind the dashboard glass with a tiny ticking sound. The heater cut out. Cold rushed into the cab so fast it felt poured. I grabbed the key and turned it. Nothing. Not even a click. The dash lights stayed on, pale and unhelpful. My breath came out in thick white bursts. Before I had time to really panic, frost started crawling over the inside of the windshield. Not condensation, frost. Delicate at first, feathering from the corners, then thickening in white veins across the glass. Side windows, rear-view mirror edges. Even the radio display filmed over with a skin of crystals. That was when I heard the tapping, soft, polite. 3 knocks against the sliding door behind me. I froze with my hand still on the key. 3 more knocks. Not outside. Inside. From the cargo space. Every stupid handwritten warning I'd laughed at came back at once. Not as information, but as a physical feeling, as my body recognized them before my mind did. Heat left my face. My hands turned clumsy. I didn't look back right away, not because I was smart, but because I couldn't make my neck move. Tap, tap, tap. Okay, I said, though my voice came out thin. Okay, fine. I went for the sat phone and almost dropped it. My fingers were already numbing. The battery was full. I powered it on, stared at the tiny signal bars, and hit the only saved number in the contacts list. Dispatch. It rang once. A woman answered immediately. Interior relay. Her voice was flat, middle-aged, unsurprised. My van died, I said, off the spur near mile 40-something. Temp gauge broke, heater's gone, and there's... Did you stop at the bridge? I think part of me knew right then that no answer would help. I lied anyway. No. A pause. Then, are you certain? Another knock from behind me. Louder this time. More deliberate. Yes. The woman took a slow breath through her nose. Keep the cab sealed. Do not open the partition. Do not respond to anything that addresses you by name. Do not check the mirror unless you absolutely must. You could have led with that, I snapped. No reaction. What is your route number? I looked at the clipboard. The page was damp at the corners now, though I hadn't spilled anything. 712. Another silence. Papers shifting on her end. That route should not be active. I laughed then, sharp and ugly. Well, I'm sitting in it. Listen carefully, she said, and for the first time her voice changed. Not warmer, worse, more human. If the bags have opened, do not touch the contents with bare skin. If you smell river water, crack the driver's window exactly 1 inch, no more. If it offers to help, hang up on me before you answer. What? The tapping stopped. The silence after it was worse than the sound had been. I turned, very slowly, and looked through the grate into the cargo space. Most of the mail sacks had been ripped open, not slashed, not torn like fabric caught on a hook, opened in ragged strips and peeled back. Letters and padded envelopes were scattered across the floor in drifts. Several parcels had crescent-shaped chunks missing from the cardboard, human bite marks. Not an impression, not a maybe. Full rows, incisors, molars, the wet chew of it still visible in the pulp. My stomach flipped hard enough I thought I might vomit. A small priority box near the partition shifted on its own, as if something inside it had rolled over and gotten comfortable. From the phone, the dispatcher said, "Do not let it make you curious." The radio hissed. Then, through the speakers, very softly, I heard my own voice say, "Dad?" I dropped the sat phone. It hit the floor mat between my boots. Something moved in the back, just beyond the reach of the dash light. Not fast, standing up. I couldn't see details yet, just height gathering in the dark, limbs uncurling from between the mail sacks like somebody had been folded away back there for a long time and finally had room to stretch. Then came the knock again, not on the sliding door this time. On the metal grate directly behind my seat, 3 neat little taps, and I understood, with that cold clarity panic gives you when it's too late to be useful, that the bridge hadn't punished me right away because it hadn't needed to. It had only marked me. This was the consequence arriving on schedule. Panic is loud in movies. In real life, at least in my experience, it makes you incredibly practical for about 30 seconds. I scooped up the sat phone, jammed it back into its cradle, and went straight for the glove box. My hands shook so badly, I had to use both of them to get it open. Registration, insurance card, a flashlight with dead batteries, a flare, half a pack of saltines, the typed rule sheet folded twice. Nothing helpful. Behind the registration sleeve, stuck to the back panel with old tape, was a second packet of papers. Not notebook paper this time. Torn pages from a yellow legal pad, folded flat and stained at the corners. I knew the handwriting before I even unfolded them. Mine. Not similar. Not maybe. Mine. Same slanted block letters I used when I was angry and trying to make lists. For a second, the cab seemed to tilt around me. The top page said, in black marker pressed so hard the letters had cut into the sheet, "If you found these, you forgot again." Under that, "You were here before." Do not trust the company packet. It teaches routine, not survival. It learns by watching what you obey. It takes the form of your regret, because regret is easier to lead than fear. Do not look into the mirror once you've let it in. You did not come here for money. That is just how it brought you back. Dad made the first agreement. You volunteered for the second. I stopped reading. My skin went hot under the cold. Somewhere behind me, paper shifted in the cargo hold with a dry whispering sound, like someone sorting letters. The thing back there had gone quiet, listening. I turned to the next page. If you remember the river, stop. If you remember the ledgers, keep going. When it speaks kindly, it is nearest. If it uses his voice, do not answer the question it asks. If you smell cedar smoke, you are close to where he left you. The official route exists to keep the shape stable. The company feeds it, desperate men, because desperate men follow instructions. Below that, in smaller writing, crowded into the margin, I wrote these after the second thaw, I think. If you're reading them, then I failed to finish it. Again, a memory hit me so hard I nearly bit my tongue. Not a full flashback, more like a door slamming open in a dark hallway. My father's truck. Not the van. An older rig, red interior, cracked windshield. Me younger by maybe 8 or 9 years, riding shotgun in a stained Carhartt, with my knees jammed up against the dash. Him chain-smoking with both windows cracked despite the cold. A ledger book on the seat between us full of names and numbers I wasn't supposed to read. He'd been in debt too. Not gambling exactly. Everything. Cards, loans, bad fuel deals, money borrowed from uglier men than he knew how to handle. He told me we were making one clean run out to somebody off the route, then the bridge, then darkness in the back of a cargo hold that smelled like wet wool and opened mail. Then my father kneeling in the snow with both hands flat on the hood, saying to something I couldn't see, "Take mine first." I gasped, so sharply my chest hurt. The next page slipped from my fingers onto my lap. There are 2 lies it uses. That the debt can be paid. That the debt belongs only to you. I remembered more, not enough, just pieces. My father had worked a freight line adjacent to the mail routes one winter, when I was 20, already dumb with betting slips and convinced luck was a skill. He'd heard stories about men who came back changed but solvent, men who vanished from ledgers, collections that stopped. He'd believed in bargains because he wanted one. I must have believed in them too, or I wouldn't have gone with him. Something happened out there, something involving the road, the route, and whatever the company let live inside the pattern of deliveries. He didn't come back the same. Then later he died with cirrhosis and a busted furnace in a dry cabin outside Wasilla, and I told myself I'd outlived his mistakes. I hadn't. I'd repeated them so exactly that I'd walked right back into the same territory, wearing a different excuse. "You came on purpose," a voice said from the cargo space. My father's voice. Low, tired, intimate in the worst possible way. "You always knew where this road went." I didn't turn around. Not yet. I kept reading. If you are reading this, then you already stopped once, and it has your outline. That means the route can see you. Do not let it remain a route. You must change the terms before it changes you. Write new rules where you can see them. The first true rule: you are not here to deliver anything. At the bottom of the page, nearly scribbled over itself, "If I forget again, remember this. It is not trapped in the van with you. You are trapped in the van with the part of you that wants to be relieved." The words made me cold in a way the failing heater hadn't. This wasn't just some external thing stalking a road. It used compliance, repetition, contract. It grew in the places where a person wanted to hand over responsibility for themselves. Debt, guilt, shame, the ache to let something else take the wheel. Men like my father, men like me. On the phone cradle, the dispatcher line had gone dead without my noticing. I looked at the typed company sheet, still lying half open on the passenger seat. Maintain speed, follow route, record anomalies, contact dispatch, complete delivery. Every instruction suddenly looked different. Not protective, training wheels. A script designed to keep me moving through the shape it needed until I became part of it. The thing behind me spoke again, and this time it used my own voice. That was the whole point of hiring you, Elias. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then I turned to the final page. There was only one sentence on it. When you can't follow the rules anymore, make better ones. Behind me, something in the cargo space smiled. I heard it in the sound of paper creasing. For the first time since the van stalled, I stopped feeling like prey. Not safe. Never that. But angry enough to think. The windshield had frosted over so completely by then that the outside world was only shapes and dull light. The road, the trees, the night. Everything beyond the glass had been reduced to a white blur. It felt less like a stranded vehicle than a sealed room floating nowhere. Maybe that helped. Maybe if I'd still been able to see the road, I would have kept trying to be a driver, to restart the engine, to call dispatch, to get back on the route and pretend the job still existed. Instead, I was stuck with the truth. Whatever mattered now was inside the van. I clicked on the dome light and grabbed the pen clipped to the route board. My hand shook once, then steadied. I leaned forward and wrote on the frost across the windshield, in letters big enough to read from the seat. Rule 1. I am not an employee. The letters cut clean tracks through the ice. As soon as I finished the final E, the radio hiss dropped in pitch, as if something had changed its footing. Behind me, the voice laughed lightly. My voice, but better controlled. Cute, I wrote again. Rule 2. This van is not a vehicle. It is a cage. Another change. Tiny, but real. The cold in the cab shifted, not warmer, just less possessive. Like I'd interrupted a process. I turned in my seat and finally looked through the grate. The figure in the cargo hold was clearer now, standing among the split mail sacks, with its head nearly brushing the roof. It still wore that impression of wet wool at first glance, but the longer I looked, the more it resolved into layers of things I recognized. My old parka from Anchorage, my father's work coat, the gray hoodie I used to wear to the off-track betting place on Spinard, strips of fabric that seemed stitched from versions of my life I'd tried to leave behind. Its face remained mostly hidden, but I could see the outline of mine beneath it like a reflection under black water. It lifted one hand and tapped the grate once with a fingernail. Keep writing, it said. You always liked rules when they sounded like control. That stung because it was true. Gambling had never been about money for me, not really. It was the rhythm of it, systems, patterns, little private laws I thought I could outsmart probability with. My father had been the same way, just in different rooms. I reached behind my seat, found the emergency pry bar bolted under the partition, and wrenched it free. The entity tilted its head. Now there's the part of you I remember. I ignored it and started ripping at the van interior. That sounds crazier than it felt. At the time, it seemed obvious. The notes had said I had to change the terms. If the van as vehicle, route, and workplace were all part of the agreement, then I needed to ruin that framework as fast as possible. I jammed the pry bar into the paneling on the sliding door and tore out a strip of insulation. Foam spilled onto the floor. Beneath it, bare metal ribbing, wiring harnesses, bolts. Structure, not service. I attacked the divider next, peeling away plastic trim until the raw frame showed through. Every piece I removed made the cargo space look less like a delivery van and more like a crude box on wheels. Less civil, more honest. The thing behind the grate took a slow step forward. The mail sacks around its feet bulged. I noticed then that one of the canvas bags nearest the partition had changed. It hung swollen and low, straps straining, like it was full of wet concrete. The handwritten note came back to me. If the mail in your bag starts to feel heavy, throw it out the window. I grabbed the sack out of reflex and almost dislocated my shoulder. It weighed far more than paper had any right to. Dead weight, pulling downward with a patient certainty that made my stomach turn. Something shifted inside it with a sound like envelopes settling into lungs. I cursed, wrestled the bag across the floor, and forced the driver's window down 2 inches. Arctic air slashed into the cab. I heaved the sack up and shoved with both arms until it wedged through the opening, split, and burst into the snow outside. Not letters, not exactly. Pale shapes spilled out and scattered under the headlight glow. Bundled slips of paper fused with frost, each one scribbled with amounts, names, IOUs, partial bets, apology notes, unpaid balances, my debts, my father's debts, numbers I recognized from my own notebook, some I didn't. They skittered over the snow like leaves in wind and then flattened there, still. The entity hissed. Good. Finally, I went back to the windshield and wrote again. Rule 3. Anything that offers relief is hungry. Rule 4. If it speaks in my father's voice, it is lying. Rule 5. I name my own debt. That last one hurt more than I expected. The pen actually tore through the frost and screeched against glass. Behind me, the creature's outline shifted. The layered clothes drew tighter around its frame. The face underneath became clearer, and what I saw there made me sick. Not a corpse, not a monster. Me, if things had gone well. Clear-eyed, clean-shaven, healthy color in the skin. Expensive winter coat instead of thrift store fleece. The version of myself I used to picture in those pathetic little fantasies after a win. Debt cleared, shoulders straight. No twitch in the jaw from stress. No stale sweat of hiding from consequences. It smiled at me with calm pity. You could stop doing this the hard way, it said. And now it wasn't using my father's voice anymore. It was using mine the way I wanted it to sound. Steady, sober, forgiving. You think setting terms makes you strong, but it's still a bargain if you need me to believe it. I wrote one more rule. Rule 6. It does not get to define who I almost was. The van shuddered. Outside, somewhere in the dark trees, lights flickered between the trunks. Small white lantern glows moving parallel to the road. I didn't look at them. I'd learned at least that much. The entity reached the grate, pressed both hands to it, and for the first time I saw that its fingers were tipped not with claws, but with my own bitten nails. I can take the burden, it said softly. That's all I've ever wanted. I looked at the ruined interior around me, the exposed frame, the scattered papers, the gouged plastic, the frost words clouding the windshield like a confession. Then I answered without meaning to. No, I said. That's all I've ever wanted. Its smile widened, and the metal between us began to bend. It didn't force the partition apart like an animal. That would have been easier. The metal softened. That's the only word for it. The grate and the frame around it started sagging inward in slow folds, as if somebody had heated steel until it turned to wax. Bolts popped free one by one with dry metallic snaps. The barrier that had made sense to me a minute earlier, front, back, driver, cargo, me, it, was being erased as gently as a hand smoothing paper flat. I backed up against the driver's door and kept my eyes off the rearview mirror. "Don't!" the thing said immediately, and that was how I knew I was right not to look. Its tone changed again. Not father, not idealized me, something in between. Patient, persuasive, intimate. The kind of voice used by men who convince you to keep borrowing because next week is the week you'll fix it. This doesn't have to be ugly. I laughed once under my breath. It's a little late for that. Not really. Metal drooped another inch. You think I'm what happens when you fail. I'm what happens when you stop pretending you were built to carry all of it. I kept one hand on the pry bar, the other on the gas can tucked behind the passenger seat. I'd noticed it earlier when I went digging for the flare. Emergency reserve. 2 gallons, maybe less. Not enough to matter in a normal fire, maybe enough to matter here. The thing stepped through the opening it had made without hurrying. It had to duck slightly under the roofline now, but otherwise it moved like a man climbing from the back of a work van after a long day. Calm, familiar. The smell hit me before the full shape did. River water, cedar smoke, and the clean, sharp scent of new bills fresh from a bank band. I focused on its boots, then on its hands. Anywhere but its face. Look at me, it said. No. Why? Because I'd spent half my life trying to become whatever I thought would earn forgiveness, and if this thing had shaped itself out of that hunger, I knew exactly how dangerous a full look would be. Because mirrors had never shown me what I was. Only what I lacked. Because somewhere in the notes I'd written to myself, in whatever version of me had known this road before forgetting it again, I'd underlined, "Do not look into the mirror like a prayer." That usually works, it said, almost amused. Curiosity, vanity, shame. People want to know what I chose for them. The sat phone crackled. Then, impossibly, the dispatcher's voice came back over speaker, without the handset being touched. "Complete the final drop," she said. "You can still clear the contract." The entity chuckled. "See? Even they know what this is." I risked a glance not at its face, but at its reflection in the black radio display. Big mistake. In the curved glass, I didn't see the creature at all. I saw myself sitting behind the wheel, with the engine running. Road open ahead. No frost, no damage. Route sheet clean on the dash. My phone buzzed with a banking notification. Account balance updated. Enough money to pay Darren Pike twice over. A text from a woman I hadn't spoken to in a year saying, "I'm glad you got things together." Another from a number saved only as Mom. "Proud of you." All of it fake. All of it built from embarrassingly simple material. Still, my chest tightened. The thing saw that and stepped closer. "That's not greed," it said softly. "You always call it greed because that sounds uglier. It's exhaustion. You're tired of owing. Tired of disappointing people before they even finish hoping for things. Tired of being your father's son." That last part landed because I believed it. My father had died owing money, apologies, and organs to alcohol in roughly equal measure. I had spent years swearing I was smarter, only to become him by a more digital route. Same appetite, same excuses, same secret belief that one dramatic turn of luck could redeem an entire pattern of cowardice. "I'm not him," I said, though it came out uncertain. "No," the entity agreed. "You're what he was trying to hand over." I went still. It must have seen something change in me, because its voice warmed. There it is. The memory. More came then. Not enough to save me, but enough to hurt. My father at the bridge years ago, drunk enough to be hopeful. A man from the relay company meeting us at dusk with a typed packet and a face that revealed nothing. Talk of routes and burdens and relief, in euphemisms nobody should have trusted. Me signing something because I thought grown men only asked for signatures on real things. The bargain was never just his. I'd been attached to it as collateral by blood, by presence, by whatever miserable consent counts when a son is dumb enough to stand beside his father and want to be useful. The entity stopped a few feet from me. "I took shape because both of you wanted me," it said. I gripped the gas can harder. "You want to be free of guilt so badly you keep calling it survival. But guilt is the thread. Cut it completely, and there's nothing left that answers to your name. Let me take it. Let me take the debt, the father, The shame, the need. Drive the last parcel. Walk away clean. What parcel? Its smile changed. I saw the answer before it spoke. There was only one thing left to deliver. Me, not my body, my claim, my burden, the part of a person that keeps dragging its history along instead of letting some hungry system digest it into silence. The dispatcher's voice returned, tinny and urgent now. Driver, acknowledge. Final delivery point may still be reached if you comply. The entity turned its head slightly, irritated. They always overtalk at the end. That was the moment I understood the company's role. They weren't wardens. They were ranchers. The route, the rules, the desperate hires, the hush around missing drivers, all of it kept this thing fed and local. Better to direct it along a road than let it wander. Better to cycle men like me through than face what happened if the hunger went uncontained. The realization did something useful. It made my fear smaller than my anger. Take the burden, the thing said one last time. That's what you came here for. I pulled the gas can free and thumbed the cap loose. No, I said. I came here because I'm exactly stupid enough to confuse surrender with mercy. Then I poured gasoline across the floor between us. For the first time, the creature flinched. Good. The official rules had all been built around preservation. Keep moving, maintain heat, stay en route, protect the cargo, contact dispatch, deliver everything entrusted to you. Even the handwritten warnings from before had been survival-oriented at first. Don't stop, don't listen, don't look, don't answer. Good advice, probably. But by the time I got to that last stretch inside the van, survival had become part of the trap too. The thing needed me thinking in terms of getting through, getting out, getting back to normal. That kind of thinking keeps a person obedient. It keeps them choosing the least disruptive action. I was good at least disruptive actions. That was half my problem. So I stopped trying to survive correctly. I didn't answer the dispatcher when she started shouting through the sat phone. I didn't look at the reflection moving in the dark curve of the speedometer glass. I didn't listen when the thing took my father's voice again and said my name the way he used to when he wanted a favor and was already ashamed of asking. I just kept pouring. Gas soaked the split mail sacks, the warped floor mats, the exposed insulation, the paperwork, the lower half of the softened partition. The smell was sharp enough to strip thought down to instinct, which was useful only because I intended to ignore instinct next. The creature backed one step, then recovered its composure. This won't hurt me, it said. Probably not. It will hurt you. Yeah. It smiled sadly, as if I were finally growing up into the lesson it had wanted all along. Then why do it? I dug the flare from the glove box, cracked the cap, and struck it. Red light flooded the cab. For one blinding second, I saw the entity fully. Not my father, not me, not success, not failure. It wore all those things the way river ice wears trapped branches beneath the surface. Faces and selves, suspended inside a deeper shape that had no proper human structure at all. Too many joints. A torso that seemed to continue farther back than the van could physically hold. Wet fabric resolving into layers of opened mail. Account statements, betting slips, foreclosure notices, unsigned apologies, route manifests, all wrapped around a hunger so old it had become procedural. It reeled from the flare light, and I finally understood that the rules were not magic words. They were habits, boundaries of behavior. The thing lived in repeated surrender, in grooves worn by the same bad choice, made 100 bureaucratic ways. I threw the flare. The fire did not spread like normal fire. It caught in lines first, along the route sheets, the addresses, the seams of the van, the border between cargo space and cab. Flames ran over paperwork and then into the air itself, tracing invisible geometry. The white shell of the van groaned. The windows didn't blacken. They brightened, glowing with internal cracks of orange, as if the space inside them were burning instead of the glass. The entity screamed with my voice. Not loud, worse than loud, familiar. The heat hit me in pulses that felt more like pressure than temperature. The upholstery didn't ignite right away. The plastic trim warped. The frost on the windows vanished all at once, not melting but recoiling. And outside, I saw the road, the trees, and between the trees, those hanging lights again, dozens of them now, suspended at different heights like patient eyes. The creature lunged. I kicked the driver's door open and hurled myself into the snow. Cold hit like impact. I went down shoulder first, rolled, lost my breath, and came up on my hands and knees beside the burning van. Flame was pouring through gaps that hadn't existed a minute earlier. The cargo section looked deeper inside than it should have been, as if the fire had opened an interior distance the vehicle couldn't contain. I heard voices in it. Mine, my father's, others, men bargaining, men apologizing, men saying just one more chance in 10 different ways. The road was to my left. The woods were to my right. Every sane cell in my body wanted the road. Road meant route, map, eventual rescue, human systems. But the notes had been right. The route was the shape that held it. Roads were promises. Roads were agreements. Roads told you where to go next, and made that feel like safety. The woods offered nothing. No instructions, no lines, no delivery points, no rules. So I crawled toward the trees. The snow was deeper there than it looked. I plunged in up to my thighs after 2 steps, and had to drag myself forward with both hands. Branches grabbed at my coat. My face went numb. Behind me, the van made a sound like a steel building exhaling, and folded inward on itself, not exploding but collapsing dimension by dimension. The voice called after me from the fire, not angry anymore, tender. "Elias!" I kept moving. "You'll still be you out there." I laughed into the snow. It came out as a choke. That's the point. A light swung between 2 spruce trunks ahead of me, white and steady, like a lantern hung by someone waiting. I turned away from it. Another glimmered farther in. I ignored that too. I forced myself off any visible game trail, any depression that suggested prior passage. Branches slapped my eyes. Snow filled my boots. Good. Let it be difficult. Let difficulty at least belong to the real world. After maybe 20 yards, or maybe a mile, it's hard to say in that dark. I hit a patch where the snow thinned under dense spruce cover and collapsed behind a fallen trunk. I lay there gasping, cheek pressed to frozen needles, and listened. No tapping, no engine, no dispatcher, just wind moving through trees and the distant settling hiss of something finished burning. Eventually, I rolled onto my back and looked up through the branches. The sky had cleared a little. Stars showed in hard, scattered points. My right hand was still clenched around something. When I opened it, I found one charred scrap of the legal pad pages stuck to my palm with melted frost. Most of the writing was gone. Only a few words remained. "Don't wait to be forgiven." I don't know how long I stayed under that log. An hour. The rest of the night. All I know is that when dawn started bleeding into the sky, I was still alive, and the road no longer felt like a place I could return to, as the same man who'd entered it. Not healed, not absolved, just no longer willing to hand myself over for management. That was enough to stand on. Barely. I watched the new van come in at sunrise from the tree line. That sentence tells you more about what I'd become than I'd like. By then, my beard had frozen white at the edges. My gloves were gone. 2 fingers on my left hand had gone stiff and waxy from the night in the snow, and one side of my face felt like somebody else's skin. I should have been trying to hike out. I should have been thinking about a hospital, or a road crew, or whether Darren Pike still wanted his money from a man who looked half dug up. Instead, I stood among the spruce and watched the road. The burned van was gone. Not hauled away. Gone. There was a blackened patch in the spur where it had folded in on itself, but no shell, no frame, No debris field like there should have been after a vehicle fire. Just a stain on the snow and a smell of cold ashes under the sharper morning air. The new van rolled in clean, as a replacement thought. Same long body, same white paint, same stripped logo shadow on the doors. It moved carefully over the rut where I'd stalled hours before. The driver was a young guy, maybe 24, wearing a borrowed winter coat, and the expression of somebody trying very hard to act like a temporary job couldn't possibly turn into a life. Desperate recognizes desperate. He parked, checked the mirrors, then reached for the dashboard clip without even looking. Muscle memory from every first shift anywhere. There should have been a packet there, official rules typed neatly on top, handwritten warnings beneath. There wasn't. He frowned, leaned closer. I could see the words from where I stood, because the morning light hit them at an angle across the driver's seat leather. Burned into the material, dark and permanent. Don't read the rules. Just drive until the guilt is gone. The young man stared for a long time. Then he laughed once, uncertainly. I felt something twist in my chest at that sound. I wanted to step out of the trees then. I wanted to lift both hands, show him I was human, tell him to get back on the highway and never take cash work from people who won't put a company name on the side of a vehicle. I wanted to tell him the route isn't a route after dark, that the company knows exactly who it hires, that relief and erasure are not the same thing no matter how tired you are. I wanted to warn him, but I had spent one night outside the road already, and that was enough to teach me there are prices for surviving a pattern without actually escaping it. My throat worked, my jaw moved. What came out was not speech. It was 3 soft knocks made in the back of my mouth. The driver's head snapped toward the trees. He couldn't see me fully at first. Just shape, gray coat, frost-bitten face between branches. A man-sized outline where no one should have been standing. When he did see me, really see me, his expression changed in a way I know too well now. Not fear exactly. Not yet. Recognition without context. The sense that something about a stranger already belongs to your life. I raised one hand, not waving, just there. His eyes dropped from me to the seat again, to the burned words, then back. Maybe he thought I was the previous driver who'd wrecked and gone strange in the cold. Maybe he thought I was some local waiting to play a joke on the new guy. Maybe some part of him, the part that had brought him this far north for cash and silence and a chance to outrun whatever he'd done down south, understood more than that immediately. He reached for the ignition. That was when I realized the worst part of all this. I wasn't the threat. I wasn't free either. I was the witness left behind at the edge of the route, the one who knew enough to make rules and not enough to end them. A frost-burned scarecrow full of warnings, standing where the trees begin, waiting to see whether the next desperate man would be obedient in the same old ways, or inventive in new ones. The engine turned over. The new driver kept looking at me. I tried once more to force words through a throat that no longer seemed interested in human use. Something useful, something plain. Go back. Burn it early. Don't bargain. What came out instead was hoarse and thin and almost gentle. Keep driving, I heard myself say. His face changed again. Because that was good advice, and because it wasn't. He pulled the van into gear and eased forward, following the spur back toward the road. As he passed the black stain in the snow where my van had disappeared, he didn't look down. Smart enough, maybe, or just lucky. At the edge of the main route, his brake lights flashed once. A hesitation. Then he drove into the corridor of trees and was swallowed by it. I stood there after the sound of the engine faded, watching the road hold its shape between the trunks. The lights in the woods stayed dark. The morning stayed still. And somewhere far ahead of him, where the bridge waited over that frozen creek, and the first easy mistake always looked like nothing at all, I imagined him reaching for the dashboard again, and finding no packet to laugh at. No old warnings to dismiss. No official instructions to trust. Only the road. Only whatever guilt he'd brought with him. Only the chance, maybe, to make better rules than I did. I'm telling you this because I still don't know whether that counts as hope. Out there, hope and bait often wore the same face.